All right, today we're diving into the story of a ruler who, frankly, doesn't get talked about nearly enough, Sultanah Safiatuddin of Aceh. We're talking about a leader who faced down colonial powers and massive internal divisions, not with a giant army, but with her incredible intellect and faith. Let's get right into her amazing story. And this was the big question, wasn't it? This was literally what everyone was asking back in the 17th century. And the answer? Well, it would decide the fate of one of Southeast Asia's most powerful kingdoms. So let's set the scene. It's Aceh, 1641. The Sultan has just died and he has no male heir. Inside the palace, different factions are scrambling, debating what to do next. And on the outside, you've got the Dutch East India Company just watching, waiting for a crack to appear, for any sign of weakness. The stakes couldn't possibly be higher.
So, how did this whole crisis kick off? It all started with this really intense debate happening right in the heart of the royal court.
You basically had two camps. On one side, you had the opposition, the religious scholars, and the powerful nobility. And their argument was pretty straightforward. Tradition, custom, and law just don't allow for a woman to be the ruler, period. But on the other side, you had an incredibly strong candidate, Putri Sri Alam. She had the perfect lineage. She was the daughter of the legendary Sultan Iskandar Muda, which gave her some serious legitimacy. And you know what? Against all those odds, Putri Sri Alam actually did become the ruler. But the way she did it was fascinating. She built a whole new kind of authority, one that was perfectly designed for the challenges she was about to face. She took on the royal title Sultanate Taj al-Alam Safiatuddin Syah. Now, this wasn't just some fancy name. It was a declaration. World crown, purity of faith. It basically announced to everyone that her rule was going to be defined by two things: worldly authority and deep, unshakable religious principle. Her strategy was just brilliant. See, she didn't try to rule like her warrior father. That wasn't her. Instead, she totally leaned into her own strengths. She put her faith front and center. She ruled with this incredible humility, sometimes even holding audiences from behind a curtain to respect custom. And get this? She turned Aceh into a major hub for Islamic scholarship. It was this amazing balancing act. You'd see her in public processions on an elephant, but always with this clear respect for modesty. This unique mix of power and piety, it completely solidified her rule. So, with things stable at home, she turned her attention to the biggest threat from the outside: the super ambitious Dutch East India Company, also known as the VOC. Now, Safiatuddin was smart. She knew going head-to-head with the Dutch military was probably a losing battle. So she picked a different battlefield entirely, the negotiating table. And her weapon of choice? Pure, sharp logic. And this right here is a perfect example. It's an absolute masterclass in diplomacy. So early in her reign, the VOC shows up demanding a ton of money for a jewel set her late husband ordered. Her response was genius. She basically said, look, that set was designed for a man. I'm a woman. It's totally inappropriate for me, so the deal's off. The Dutch were furious. They pushed and pushed, but she just refused to break. She patiently waited them out until they finally reached a settlement, on her terms, not theirs. And that one incident really set the tone for her entire 34-year reign. This idea became the foundation of her foreign policy. She sent a clear message. Aceh was not for sale, and she was not a ruler you could just push around. This entire diplomatic approach was a huge change in how Aceh was run, especially when you compare it to her very famous father. I mean, the difference between her rule and her father's is just night and day. Her dad, Iskandar Muda, was all about military expansion and conquering new lands. Safiatuddin's legacy, though, was built on creating diplomatic stability and just preserving what they had. And you gotta understand, this wasn't weakness at all. It was an incredibly smart, calculated strategy to survive in a world that was changing fast. And that's really the key takeaway, isn't it? She understood something fundamental. The game had changed. In this new era of powerful colonial companies, the biggest victory wasn't about winning more territory. It was about making sure the territory you already had stayed free, stayed prosperous, and stayed yours. So, what was the end result of this radical new strategy? Well, it was a legacy of strength, sovereignty, and incredible endurance. 34 years. Just think about that number for a second. For over 3 decades, while so many other kingdoms in the region were falling one by one to colonial powers, Sultanah Safiatuddin held on.
She navigated every storm and left her kingdom strong and, most importantly, independent.
And think about what she was protecting all that time. She defended Aceh's actual sovereignty from the Dutch. She made sure it stayed a vital hub for trade and Islamic learning. And maybe the most important thing she did was prove to the world that real leadership could come from diplomacy, wisdom, and faith, not just from having the biggest army.
Which brings us to a final, really important question. Her story is just incredible, right? It's a story of success against all odds. She was a scholar, a diplomat, a formidable ruler who literally outsmarted one of the biggest global powers of her time. So why isn't her name one of the first that comes to mind? It's a question that kind of forces us to think about what kind of power we choose to remember and whose stories we decide are worth telling.